Command screen of Ukraine's Strategic Strike Division, an infrared feed from a Horlitsia E UAV at 6,200 meters locked on the objective with surgical clarity, the Bryansk chemical plant. This was not an ordinary factory. It was the industrial heart of the Bryansk region, the chemical lung that fed the southwestern front. The complex covered more than 18 hectares. Every week it produced over 60 tons of explosives, propellants, and specialized feedstocks, the exact chemistry used to build cruise missiles, kamikaze UAVs, and heavy artillery propellants. More than 40% of the propellant consumed in Zaporizhia, Kharkiv, and Donetsk traced back to the nitrate pressing lines inside Bryansk's reinforced concrete workshops. In minutes, a coordinated multi-vector strike, electronic deception, low-level penetration, and Western cruise missiles launched from Ukrainian aircraft would turn the Bryansk skyline into a daytime pyrotechnic spectacle, reducing a Russian defense industry node valued at over $1.2 billion to a burning ruin. From the southwest, roughly 140 kilometers out, two Su-24M crews, call signs Torch 1 and Torch 2 from the 7th Tactical Air Regiment, cut across a radar corridor. They hugged the deck at 88 to 92 meters and held 870 kilometers and 3 meters of depth. The deception phase began early across the northern air defense perimeter of Bryansk. At least 6 decoys were detected and consumed by short-range defense systems. Pantsir S-1 and SA-15 Tor M2 batteries patrolling the industrial ring. That attrition was intentional and operationally acceptable. 6 minutes, emissions from the surviving UAVs forced the S-400's 92 N6E Gravestone radar at Melitopol to rotate its antenna about 28 degrees off axis and reassign its scan sector to handle localized interference. Regional Air Defense Control automatically reallocated surveillance resources northward, precisely where the spoofed data showed multiple low-level incursions. The result was an overloaded, misdirected Russian picture. From the south, the two Su-24Ms slipped into the low-altitude radar lane, flying below 90 meters and effectively invisible to the dispersed radar nodes. At exactly 4:10 p.m., with roughly 20 kilometers to the target, both crews prepared for release, and then a technical fault arrived. The weapons bus voltage spiked plus 2.4 volts above nominal, triggering a PWR surge alert. Pilots switched to an auxiliary stabilization circuit, an improvised voltage regulator hand built by Ukrainian engineers from recovery gear. Weapons remained armed and mission-capable. Torch 1 throttled back to synchronize with the planned ground radar blackout. Its radar warning receiver reported intermittent emissions, the hallmark of semi-active Russian scans. The Storm Shadow's weapon controller entered inertial standby and confirmed preloaded reference imagery, including thermal signatures, rooftop geometry, vent clusters, and ingress points for the nitrocellulose processing hall. Torch 2, flying 2 kilometers parallel, reported a backup guidance feed from Horlitsia E, a real-time electronic map of local jamming that identified sectors masked by Kushuka 4 systems. Then, Torch 1's RWR flashed red. A Big Bird S-300 radar had registered a return. Russian reaction was faster than expected. 4 Pantsir S-1 mounts near Gorky slewed west, but failed to acquire the low-flying Su-24s. At 4:20 minutes and 38 seconds p.m., the cockpit interface confirmed weapon ready, GPS lock. Torch 1's Storm Shadow completed image reference synchronization. Countdown start sequence held on standby. At 4:23 p.m., the release order was given. Torch 1's Storm Shadow left its rail. The turbojet spooled in 1.8 seconds, control surfaces locked for cruise, and the missile settled at about 880 kilometers per hour toward Bryansk's industrial core. Torch 2 delayed its launch by 15 seconds to stagger impact times. A transient current spike of roughly 30 amps stressed an auxiliary feeder. The improvised stabilization rig absorbed the surge and kept the mission live at 4:23 minutes and 15 seconds p.m. The second Storm Shadow left its rail. It wandered 4 degrees off axis and began its final approach from the southwest. The missile's INS started to record micro-accelerations, continuously cross-referencing against the digital terrain map and keeping its positional error under 5 meters. The Su-24s peeled away immediately after release, descending below 90 meters, switching on their self-protection suites and egressing back toward Poliske. The Ukrainian Air Battle Coordinator confirmed both weapons had cleared the aircraft cleanly, no interceptions had occurred, guidance remained stable, and GPS integrity held at an acceptable level despite Kushuka 4 jamming. Ahead of them, the 2 Western cruise missiles ran a pre-programmed course. The human phase of the mission was over. From this point, the remaining work belonged to algorithms, sensors, and a flight path that had been baked into the weapon's memory weeks earlier. At 4:23 minutes and 42 seconds p.m., the first Storm Shadow rode steady at a cruise altitude under 30 meters, skimming a sparse tree belt south of Bryansk at nearly 880 kilometers per hour. It kept altitude via pressure sensors and inertial updates, wings fully extended. The navigation stack, an INS fused with Tercom terrain matching algorithms, continuously corrected the flight path from onboard digital maps, allowing the missile to operate without satellite fixes. GPS signals faded as the missile entered the zone masked by the Kushuka 4 emitter, positioned a few kilometers from the target. The internal guidance logic continued to run autonomously, holding net navigation error within safe margins. Every 0.5 seconds, the system ingested acceleration updates and adjusted flight parameters via an internal interpolation module. At 4:24 minutes and 17 seconds p.m., the second missile trailed by about 2.5 kilometers, flying on a track offset by 4 degrees and preparing to approach from the southwest. The crossed approach geometry was deliberate. Force any remaining point defense systems to split tracking loads. Below, the SA-15 battery east of Bryansk had not yet detected any signature from the Storm Shadow duo. At 4:25 minutes and 12 seconds p.m., the first missile overflew the southern substation of the Bryansk complex. Its image-matching routines began to engage. Live frames were compared against preloaded reference data. The M3 building, the nitrate and ethyl centralite processing hall, was positively identified. Sloped roof, triple exhaust stacks, steel frame. Match probability, 92.6%, target lock confirmed. Flight control surfaces trimmed for the final intercept, minus 3.2 degrees, optimizing the penetration angle. 6 seconds later, the second missile acquired a secondary target, the Central Administration Block C1. Roughly 300 meters from M3. Geometry and structure matched the signatures of control rooms and production line command nodes. At 4:25 minutes and 20 seconds p.m., as both Storm Shadows crossed the edge of the industrial belt, nearby short-range air defense, a Tor-M2 battery sighted on the eastern logistics perimeter, escalated autonomously to Tactical Priority 1. A control console alarm declared, "Anomaly detected. Sector 186 degrees to 204 degrees. Altitude, ultra-low." Gun director mounts slewed toward the alert and switched to combat ready. The missiles were now at about 3.2 kilometers, barely 13 seconds of flight, and at such ultra-low altitude, they only appeared in radar during a handful of sweeps. Twin 30mm 2A38 guns opened short bursts, while a 57E6 missile was launched, 2.8 seconds after target lock. A hail of shells and the single interceptor followed, but the shot group failed to catch the high-speed, low-flying threats. Fire control radar was momentarily blinded by terrain clutter returns, a common failure mode against pop-up, sea-skimming, or treetop-level targets at speed. The 57E6, guided by radar, detonated more than 180 meters from its aim point. On the operator console, a final red banner appeared. Weapon locked, impact imminent. 7 seconds later, the first storm shadow struck the roof of Hall M3 at a -3.2-degree angle. Its tungsten carbide penetrator punched through corrugated sheeting, severed stainless exhaust stacks, and smashed into 0.7 meters of reinforced concrete. Penetration depth peaked at roughly 3.2 meters. The secondary detonation produced a compressive shock wave that collapsed the steel trusswork on the second level and drove burning gases into adjacent storage. Chain reactive fires erupted as drums of nitroglycerin, organic solvents, and thermal stabilizers were violently overpressured. Flames leapt more than 40 meters into the sky, a pillar of fire visible from downtown Bryansk over 6 kilometers away. At 4:25 minutes and 30 seconds p.m., the second storm shadow impacted the C1 administration block at a +4.6-degree strike angle, the penetration point just inside the western eave where primary control racks and coordination servers were housed. The blast sheared the roof away, destroyed high-capacity switchgear, and triggered catastrophic secondary electrical fires. Electromagnetic transients from the explosion severed remaining command and control signal paths. The plant's coordination system collapsed. At the Bryansk Chemical Plant Control Center, operator screens all flipped to Lost Feed, System Error 504. Telemetry from production lines E2 and E3 vanished. Backup channels could not bring systems online because auxiliary transformers had been destroyed in the second blast. The sub-distribution board on C1's first floor ignited, multiple main breakers tripped, and temperatures exceeded safe thresholds across chemical storage zones. Within 7 seconds, the entire production control hub, synthesis lines, and auxiliary power station were rendered functionally inoperative on any short-term recovery timeline. At the Russian Military Monitoring Center in Klintsy, the plant's control feed went dark, only 4 seconds after the second explosion. The signal across the entire network went down, forcing technical teams to switch to backup systems. But the optical switchgear had been damaged by an electrical surge. The connection was completely lost, with no possibility of restoration. At 4:30 minutes and 45 seconds p.m., the plant's automatic fire suppression system activated, but water pressure measured below 2.1 bar insufficient to reach the second level of Hall M3. The blaze ran